Without further ado, I'll introduce Aileen Barclay. She's our speaker tonight. She is a garden ecologist. She's got decades of experience and a background in biology, as well as a love of nature. She's used that to develop a unique approach to landscaping. So she's also delivered a lot of education seminars and presentations like this one across Ontario. So we are very grateful and lucky to have her here. So I'm just gonna bring her in here. Hi, Aileen.
Hi, everyone. So I thought I'd, in case people were tired of looking at webinars, I thought I'd jazz it up with some feather boa, have a little fun, but it's really itchy, so it's not gonna be lasting very long. And I'm also drinking out of a fancy cup, but it is just water. So thanks for coming today. This is probably the biggest crowd I've been in front of that I haven't seen. So it's a bit odd to not be able to see the faces and talk to the people out there. But hopefully you'll still learn something and maybe have a little fun. So Scott, when you're ready, let me know when you want to switch over to my presentation.
Yeah, go ahead. You can share your screen.
Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to the feather boa in the video, and I will share my screen. Okay. Hopefully this is working. Sure, there we go. So as Scott mentioned, my background is biology, but when I was 17, my father passed away, and my mom, I don't know how to say it nicely, so I just say it straight. She looks at a plant and it dies. So my dad, being a big gardener, we had a backyard that had basically no lawn and all gardens, and it needed help badly. So I started way back then, and a lot of trial and error, more errors than successes at the beginning. And then I went to school and did biology, and got into doing ecological restoration, and that included planting native plants, native shrubs, native trees, restoring habitat for things like pollinators, butterflies, etc. So my experience is based on, as much as I can, my personal experience with dealing with these plants. And years ago, I actually was partnered with someone who was we had a small kind of at-home native plant nursery. And I realized this just recently when I went out in my garden. I have a rabbit for the first time, and he's eaten all my favorite plants, but none of them were my native plants. So I now have holes in my garden, and I think it's nature's way of telling me I need to get more native plants in there, because I've become a little, I kind of moved away from them a bit just because they were harder to come by. But I think that this, my little buns, I call him, the rabbit, who has no fear of me and just eats my plants while staring at me and gives me a bit of a showdown. So I'm going to be getting back into and adding way more native plants in this year. So what is a native plant? The actual definition is certain people have different, I guess, boundaries, geological or geographical boundaries of what is native to what area. There are some people that say if it's not within 25 square kilometers, it should not be counted as a native plant. Other people will group entire North America, that anything in that is considered native to North America, and then everything in between. So some people will say, for instance, Manitoba maple are an invasive plant, but they're actually a native plant that has just spread or expanded its range. So as you can see, there's no definitive answer, but basically what we're going to do is to mimic or try and replicate what would have been here prior to settlement and clearing of the land. Now, how far back that goes is, again, another variable that is all over the place, because the indigenous communities did a lot of land clearing as they moved through. So are we going back to before the glaciers or after? So my point is that it's variable in terms of how you actually define it. However, in our Southern Ontario GTA kind of context, that's what we're going to try to stick to. Why are they important in landscaping? If you guys remember that movie, I don't remember the name of it, but if you build it, they will come, the baseball one. It's the same with native plants. Right now, our native pollinators are really being hit, the bees, the butterflies, and they're the ones that are really relying on them. So it's important that our backyard landscapes are expansions of some of the natural areas that we have. Now, we also have a lot of invasive plants that are coming into our forests and our natural areas, which are bumping out our native plants. And so if we can control them and offer them wherever possible, that's amazing. So that also ties into why they're important. Now, I used to see, years ago, native plants are great for a garden because they're drought resistant and they're disease resistant. And that's true, just like with every other plant, when they're planted in the right place. So the old gardening adage of right plant, right place absolutely applies to native plants as well. So if you take, say, a water lily, yeah, it's drought tolerant in a pond, but it's not drought tolerant in your back garden. And that's a bit of an extreme, but they have to go into what they would traditionally have grown in order to have that really good success. So we're going to talk about how to use them in your garden and then where are they available. And that is something I did come up with a list, or I have a list, that is native plants, nurseries, that are offering contactless or delivery in light of the COVID. So I will try to send that to Scott and send it out to everybody. Hopefully, Scott, you're okay with that because I just committed you to it. Oh, and already my pictures are off. All right. So this is just the definition of it and why they're important. So I like this little picture because it's this frog on my friend Phil's thumb. And in the background, you can see what looks like a wetland with some native plants growing in, native wetland plants. So this was a wetland area that had been left open for cattle to graze in. And in the fall of the previous year, we fenced out the cattle as a way to, help the wetland. And we went in the spring, and you can see all the plants that bounce back. And this cute little green frog, gray tree frog, sorry, not green frog, it's a green gray tree frog, was just there, and he just looked so happy. And it was like a thumbs up, thank you for giving me that habitat. So nature really does bounce back incredibly when you're giving it that chance to do so. We talked about this, ecosystem, invasive species, urban sprawl. Now genetics, that's a bit of you're probably thinking, what? So if you look at the pictures on the right, we have our echinacea, which is not our true native, but it's close. And then down below, we have these fancy cultivars. Now, sometimes the cultivars still provide that great benefit. But in the case of, in particular, the echinacea, that the fancy ones don't have that durability, that strength, and sometimes they're done like double bloom or something. And that tweak to make them look prettier in your garden will actually restrict pollinators from getting access to them. So there might not be as much pollen, they're not as hardy, or they're physically restricted from getting pollinated from what we're trying to help. So watch your genetics in terms of cultivars and fancy versions of the true natives. Okay, so as I was mentioning again, right plant, right place, and there's some banded bumblebees on Virginia, Clematis virginiana, which is native clematis, and it's a beautiful, totally underrated little vine. And then as sourcing native plants is difficult. I get so happy when I walk into Home Depot and in the spring and they have a rack of native plants or one of those big box stores. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I might go back 2 weeks later and they're still there and they're not looking great. So when you're going to add native, there are some natives that will just wow you, but there's some that are very subtle. They're not going to have that big bloom that you're used to from your typical garden plants. So you have to be able to plan well, plant in groups and masses, but also plan for different other features that aren't just that big fancy flower, texture and foliage color and height differences, so that you're still getting wow in your garden and it's not dependent on how big and long lasting that bloom is. I tell this story every time I'm talking about native plants. So I went to I spend a lot of time in garden centers. I always joke that my ex once said to me, oh my gosh, do you really need to go into another garden center? And that's why he's my ex. And I'm going to assume you're all laughing. So I went in and they had all these Pearly Everlastings like in the garbage. And I'm like, whoa, and they were covered in butterfly larvae, caterpillars. And I said, well, what are you doing with those? He said, oh, some bugs eating them, so we're throwing them out. And I said, well, can I take them if you're going to throw them in the garbage? Yeah, just get rid of them. That's gross. And they were the larvae, the butterflies of the painted lady. So I took them home and grew them. And my friend says, oh, I'd love to have some butterfly plants. So I gave them to her and I said, now these ones next spring will get caterpillars on them and they will eat them and it'll look horrible. And I'll show you a picture when we get to that plant. She's okay. So the following spring, she's like, oh God, something ate your plant. So I got vinegar and sprayed them all. I said, Jen, do you remember that discussion we had that these were the caterpillars that will turn into butterflies when they're done eating your plants? And she felt terrible about that. So when you're going to plant some plants that are native, you're doing it not just to feed the pretty butterflies, but to feed the caterpillars that come before the butterflies. But because they've co-evolved together, it's yeah, go ahead, eat my leaves, and then they just recover and it's great. So just be prepared for that. So if you're someone that cannot stand munching, then stay away from larval host plants. That's what you're looking for. Adult pollinating plants are different. They're in for the nectar, but larval host plants will lead to chewing, which is what you want. So you can't have the butterflies without the caterpillars. So some native plants are very finicky and they need very specific conditions. We have a native wood poppy. It's beautiful, but it's endangered. And I think there's something like 5 known locations in all of Ontario. And they need one specific ant that has to pollinate them in one specific time and all these things have to come into place. So that's going to be really hard to replicate in your own backyard. There's other ones that will grow everywhere. Excuse me. Also watch for unethical collections. I see on these buy and sell things, like I can't even tell you how many wild leeks collected with the bulbs, like not even hundreds, probably hundreds of thousands of them for sale. And it infuriates me because a wild leek takes up to 7 years to successfully reproduce. And they're yanking it up and selling it. So even if they're selling it for you to grow, just be aware. Trilliums take a long time. Someone selling trilliums for $1 each, ask them nicely, hey, where'd you get this? Sometimes they've gone into areas where they're not allowed to and taken the trilliums out in order to make a quick buck. It is illegal to take anything off of anyone's property. So people think pulling trilliums is illegal. It's not if you have permission. And with the exception of crown land, conservation areas, parklands, regional forests, they're not yours for the picking. Okay, so if you have your own property and you want to do it, that's okay. But just watch for those kind of seems too good to be true, and don't be afraid to ask. Okay. So where do I start? This was my front garden, and when I moved in it, within a week of unpacking, I was doing the gardens because I couldn't stand looking at them. They were ugh. So start with a manageable sized garden. I see people that decide they're going to get rid of their entire front lawn, and that's great. And they're not planning properly. And within 2 years, that entire beautiful front intention garden is weeds, and the town's showing up going, those are noxious weeds, you have to get rid of them. So be realistic about your timing. Start by maybe just replacing some of those needy plants that aren't natives, like annuals that you buy every year. There's late frost, bye-bye. Like me, I have a couple holes in my gardens thanks to Bun Bun, so I'm going to now seek out natives to put in there. Be realistic, know your exposure, soil, and space. It's not dirt, it's soil. You can have rocky soil, sandy soil, loamy soil, wet soil, dry soil, clay. That's what I have, clay. So be realistic about that and your exposure. Plants, if it gets a little bit of sun, that doesn't count as full sun. So 6 hours or more is full sun. Things under Norway maples, full shade is really hard to grow in. There's barely anything that'll grow successfully. all plants need something to grow, some kind of sunshine, okay? So whether it's an hour of direct sunlight or 1 to 2 hours of dappled sunlight, they still need something. That's how they work. That's the photosynthesis, okay? With the exception of a few odd plants. When you're thinking of getting rid of your lawns and gardens, be aware of where people are walking or passing through. The mailman, is he cutting across? Then don't put delicate flowers in his path. People will take the path of least resistance. If you have children, they'll do the same thing. They won't walk all the way around and up the staircase. They'll just cut across the lawn. Dogs, if you can see, I've got a sidewalk on my side of the street, and so all the dogs walk by. And if you put anything upright along that edge of that walkway, the dogs will pee on it. And once one dog pees on it, every other dog walking by will pee on it. So be very aware. You want nothing upright. Even if grass grows a bit longer than the rest, they'll start doing that. So really look at how the land's being used before you start planting new gardens that could lead to a lot of heartache and extra work and all that. I should say my approach to gardening is lazy gardening. I want my garden to look pretty, and if I don't get to it for 2 or 3 weeks because of work, it still better look good. If I want to go and fuss around with it, I'll do that. Right now, my gardens, and you can see this whole front one's now a full garden, and over 50% of my backyard is garden. And it takes me maybe 5 minutes a week, where my lawn takes so much time to mow and edge and all that. It's like almost an hour every week. So I will give you tips to try and keep your maintenance down, because you want to enjoy your garden, not be a slave to it. So again, plan it right. So you can see what I did was I edged, flipped. I ended up sheet mulching. But the really important thing is to get rid of your grass. Grass will grow in your garden, but not in your lawn where you want it. So down below, you can see that this is one type of grass that I pulled out, and that's the root, and it keeps going. It would go right off the screen. And you probably know that grass. If you pulled anything, pull, and it just, the root traces back. So it's really important to build it right, or you'll be invaded with grass, and it's just a pain to deal with, okay? And don't plan to water. Rain barrels are great, but when you need to water, the rain barrels are usually empty. And when you start supplementing water, it creates a whole lot of problems, especially with native plants. So you end up with powdery mildew. And if you have a plant that really likes water, so it's, say, a riparian type plant, so it grows on or near the edge of water, wetland, creek, stream, things like that. You can go, but I really love that. I really want marsh marigold, say, in my backyard. If you're going to constantly water it to fake its natural habitat, it's still not going to work. You can't fake nature. So if you have a spot that stays wet all the time, then, oh, great, go for it. But don't try to put something that needs moist soil into dry soil, because you just can't win. You're fighting its natural ability to just thrive where it's supposed to be, okay? It's hard to not look out and assess that everybody's understanding what I'm saying. So again, I'll assume you're all nodding going, yeah, okay. So plant in the soil, not the dirt. That's most of the time. So when you want your traditional type garden, you get a lot more varieties when you have better soil. Planting in sand is hard. Planting in clay is literally hard. So we always want that nice, loamy, rich, awesome soil. So we can add to it and supplement a bit. It doesn't mean you can't still plant if you don't want to, because when you start supplementing soil, so whether you're trying to change the pH or the texture, it'll still revert back to what it's supposed to be. Over time, it'll get better, but it'll still revert. So it's really hard to change the pH and the texture. So you can kind of play with it a little bit and start feeding it, but you can also just say, okay, I gotta admit it, I have sandy soil. So I'm gonna look for plants that do well in sandy soil, because that makes my life easier. And the great thing about native plants is that there's something that will grow everywhere. So I'm showing you like a fraction, a percentage of a fraction of a minuscule of the native plants that are available. And so if you have those fussy spots, there are lots of choices, native and non-invasive non-natives. So you don't always have to improve your soil, but it just gives you a little bit more choice, I guess. If you have clay and you want something like butterfly weed, which we'll talk about, butterfly milkweed, which is seriously one of my favorite plants, you're not going to, period. It needs light, well-drained soil. So there's advantages to both spectrums of the soil. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can choose to augment it, or you can deal with what you have. And I don't, oh, there we go. Mulch. So mulch, these first few numbers, it reduces weeding by 90%. Yay! I actually like weeding, but I want it to be easy and just to get frustration out or something. It reduces water loss from your soil, so that evapotranspiration of water, by 70%. Moderates your soil temperature, so when you get the bookends of the seasons, fall and spring, you're going to get a crazy hot day and then really cold at night. And the roots will suffer. And even in the summertime, when it's blazing hot, having exposed soil means that the roots heat up. And when soil temperature gets, I think it's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit and up, roots just stop working. So your plant cannot get that water. So it helps buffer those extreme temperatures. Just like in nature, natural products are better. So if you go out into a forest, nobody's raking up the leaves. Nobody's going in and cleaning up all the stems from last year. And yeah, it might look a little rough right now, but give it a month, you won't even see it. So if you're constantly putting only cedar, for instance, mulch into your soil, you're only getting one type of diversity. And cedar, which is why it's so good for things like decks and why cedar can handle growing in wet areas, it has natural antifungal and antibacterial oils in it, which reduces rot from being in those wet areas. But if you're constantly adding that into your soil, there's going to be an impact on your good soil microbes. So the good things in there, the ones that help feed your plant, the positive fungi, the positive bacteria. So like anything in life, diversity is better. So when I mulch my garden, and I'm looking at my garden going, I really should get to that. What I do is I break down the stems and I put them on the soil. And then kind of like what I did when I was cleaning up as a kid, I just shove it under and I put the mulch on top so that it's still there, but it's covered under and it looks pretty. Like when you stuff under your bed when someone's coming over or into your cupboards. I do that with my garden. So all the stems and old last year growth stays there, and I throw my mulch on top. And I switch my mulch every year. So I'll get, say, pine bark one year, cedar the next. I'll get just compost as mulch the next year. If I can find a mixed wood chip mulch, which is my favorite, I will buy every bag I can find because that is mixed wood. And again, that's diversity. So I have to mulch every year because my soil is so active that the last year's dead stuff and mulch just gets absorbed into the soil so quickly, which is a really good sign. I have all kinds of birds in there looking and rolling around, and I never fertilize. I water a new plant maybe by hand if I remember, and things are growing out of control. I get accused of watering at night. I don't. I just have really good soil. So think about that with your mulch. It's not only all those features you see on the screen, but it's also contributing to your soil health. How much water is enough? It's my finger test. And this is dependent on the plants. If you have dry alvar type plants that like to grow on rocks, they're not going to need a lot of water. So this is just an average basis for all gardens. So stick your finger in, and the soil depth is up to your knuckles. If you feel moisture in that first little inch, don't water. If you can stick your entire finger in and it's bone dry, then maybe you want to add some water if there's no rain in the forecast. Okay, keep well watered is a very, very vague term. And overwatering probably kills more plants than underwatering. So stick your finger in. It's good for you to touch soil. There's all these beneficial things that happen to your brain, and you breathe in this really good, sounds awful, but it's a good fungus that stimulates your happy parts of your brain. So stick your finger in the water. It's a cheap and easy way. If it's wet at the tip, do not water. If it's bone dry and your plants are drooping and it's not mid-afternoon on a 35-degree day, then add water. Okay, it's best to check end of day, beginning in the morning, because plants will wilt a little bit on a hot day. It doesn't mean they need soil. It's just they're kind of going, oh boy, it's hot. Let's take a break for a bit. It doesn't mean that they're about to die of drought. They'll usually perk up as it gets cooler. Okay. Oh, this is a repeat slide. Sorry, I always go in and fuss with my presentations just before I do them and do stuff like this. So we'll skip over that. We'll get to the good part, the plants. So the first one I'm going to get to is Coreopsis, and there's a few of these. So there's lance leaf, plains, and moonbeam. These are late spring, early summer. I call them, especially the lance leaf ones, the sunshine flowers. They're very happy flowers to me. They're very bright. Great at drought tolerance, but you have to deadhead. And that, for me, not my thing. But I do, you have trade-offs. So years and years and years ago, at another garden I had a south-facing retaining walls. It was a raised garden, and blazing hot, well-drained soil. It was so dry. Even my lavender was getting droopy. But no, my Coreopsis was like, hey, we're happy. It did so well. So that's why it's on this list. So I'll show you what that looks like. So nice, bright, sunshiny plant. But you can see on the right what I mean if you don't deadhead, which is my garden that I didn't deadhead. It looks a bit scruffy. If you like to deadhead, awesome, go for it. But it's not one of those easy ones that you can just kind of take the shears and go whoop and have it rebloom. You have to kind of pick through and take off your deadheads. So if you have time, go for it. It's worth it. If you're like me and you go, oh, I should, but nah, then maybe not. So here's another option at the end. This is Plains Coreopsis, so it's got this nice kind of red center. As you can see, it's still got that deadhead issue. But this one, boom, this is the moonbeam. Again, you can see that little fine leaves, very good for drought tolerance, very sunny. The deadheads are there, but they're not as obvious because there's so many and they're quite little. So this one's a much nicer one if you don't want to have to deadhead. And again, the cultivars, they come in different colors. Okay, nice. Okay, grasses, little Bluestem, one that I left at my old garden and I've yet to find a new one to replace it with. Love this little guy, wonderful little plant. It's about, maybe grows about 2 feet tall. It's got a blue-green foliage. It's a clump forming, stunning copper color in the fall, and it's a great winter interest. So there's kind of the different pictures. And you can see how great it is in the winter. It just holds and it flops in this gorgeous copper color. Great little plant. That's little Bluestem. This one I've seen at places like Bradford greenhouses. Usually it's a bit of a cultivar, but it's still worthy of putting in your garden for sure. And then it's big brother, big Bluestem, which is just like that, but it grows 4 or 5 feet tall. Okay, wild columbine. This is just such a wonderful, easy plant. It self-seeds like crazy, but it's not a problem because you just pull it out. Like you can just grab a handful, pull it out, done. So it spreads by seeds only, not by roots or suckers or any of those underground things that are really hard to deal with. It just starts growing where it wants and you say, I don't want you there. And you grab a handful of it and okay, it's not going to grow there. Or you dig it up and give it to your friend. It's wonderful. Again, if it's in a tight spot and it's overwatered, you'll get a bit of powdery mildew on it. So don't overwater it. The hummingbirds like it. The bees like it. It's just a really dainty, cute little plant. Full sun to partial shade. So there is a cultivar, and this is one that the cultivar is, I would never put it in my garden. I'm sorry, everyone has their own taste, and that's okay. Just not my taste when you have this instead. I think this is, the native version is just blows the other one out of the water. Beautiful, dainty sprays of flowers, so you can see they can get quite big. I did pick up a dwarf one that's about half the size. Again, it's probably not going to be as good for hummingbirds because it's a bit lower to the ground, but it still gets some bees and stuff in it. Lovely little plant, really pretty colored. Great for that part shade edge type of area. All right, so Pearly Everlasting. This is the one that I found and had to give to my neighbors. I rescued them. They are a little aggressive. They will spread a bit. If you have an area that you just want to kind of have some nice plants, you have a bigger property and you just want to let it grow and spread, that's great. If you have it in a very small space, it might get a little too aggressive for you and you will have to do a little bit of work. But if you really want to support butterflies, this is your plant. If you want to learn and watch butterflies, it's very cool. So there it is, these light little white flowers, and you can actually dry them and keep them like that, in that shape. And they've got that gray fuzzy foliage, so they're very dirt tolerant. But this is what happens. And it doesn't look pretty unless you're picking them up for free at the garden center. These are all the different caterpillars. I believe it's Red Admiral and Painted Lady. And this is just one, like this is 1, 2, 3, 4 plants in about a 3 foot by 3 foot area. And I lost count, I think it's 70 of these things. And they all turn into butterflies. And they ate and ate and ate, and then boom, they were gone. And the plant went, all right, let's do this. And out came the blooms. So yeah, it's going to look a little messy, but when you look close and you realize why, it's absolutely worth it. It's a nursery for butterfly babies. And they leave these gross little kind of fecal nasty things, but they'll go away really quickly. You can see another one up there. Okay, if someone finds this, can you let me know? I found this in Walmart once and I almost fell on the ground. And then of course I had to rescue it, so I bought them all. But that was another garden, so I've left a lot of these plants behind. I have to sneak in one day and steal them. I'm kidding. This one is a wonderful little plant, very early spring border bloomer, not a very big plant. It's great for the borders of your gardens. Now, even when the awesome flowers are gone, it still has a nice, compact, green, nice little feature, like shape to it. If you ever get a chance, if anyone knows the Cardin alvar, if we're allowed out in June, about the first or second week of June, if you go up to Cardin alvar, amazing birds, if you're into birds, just incredible there. But when the prairie smokes in bloom, the fields turn pink. They look like pink smoke across the whole field. And between that and the Indian, I think it's the Indian paintbrush, so the true one, not the hawkweed. It's an orange one, and then there's another yellow native plant I can't think of right now. Anyways, it is incredible to see. So that's where you get the idea of prairie smoke. It's actually from alvars, and alvars are very, they're a line-based rocky area, which makes these guys really good for drought tolerance. They're used to growing on rock, but look at this cute little plant. It is so amazing. What you're looking at are the little seed tufts. So if you look at the bottom, I don't know if you can see my arrow, that little, this is the flower, which is like, oh, okay. But when it goes to these seed pod features, wow, it's incredible. And when you have them en masse, it's, wow, I just can't say enough about it. It's, even on its one little plant is worth it. I haven't had this one in my garden for, oh, geez, probably 15 years. And I'm dying to find it again. I really do have to like just get it. Now that everyone's doing online ordering, I should be able to get it back in. Amazing plant. And I still go to Walmart hoping one day I'll find it there again. No luck. Okay, oh, now that I'm, when I go through all these, I reminisce about all my past gardens and man, I should have brought that plant. And I wonder what happened to this plant. You have a problem when you start knowing your plants personally and missing them. So Foxglove Beardtongue. There are a lot of cultivars with this one. There's that Husker Red one that was perennially year, 1 year. Wonderful little plant. But the native is really awesome as well. It doesn't have the red foliage, but wow, it's great. And holy cow, do the bees love it. Like it's rare to see one of these without a cute little furry bumblebee butt in there. It's awesome. And they're full sun to partial shade, or early spring, early summer. Not a, I'll show it to you, not a tidy plant. It's more of a, I call this a spray of white flowers in the garden. There are so many little ones. So if you like that neat, formal, kind of rose looking plant, maybe not this one, but the texture, the color, the benefits to the bees. Wonderful little plant, really easy to look after. So there it is, and you can kind of see the tubular shape so that the bees crawl right in, push in, and by doing so, they pick up the pollen to get to the nectar. Really cool little plant. And then we have its cousin. This is the hairy beardtongue, which is a horrible name. Foxglove at least has a little bit of kind of, elegance to it, but hairy's not. And I actually think this one's much prettier. It's a little shorter. But it's purple. It's really neat. So you can see it's similar in shape. I find this a bit more compact between the two, and you get a bit more color. White's great, especially if you spend a lot of time in your garden at night, because white helps reflect moonlight and stuff and shines more. If you're in your garden more during the day, that purple just adds that extra color. And bees love anything that's mauve purple. It's like, ooh, mauve, I don't care what it is, I'm going in. So this is the hairy beardtongue. And you can see that one up a carton too. And then, the one I really, really want. Like, how can I don't know, maybe get a sand pit or sandbox and grow it, because I want this. I convinced my friend to grow it in her. She's got the most gorgeous sandy loam soil. And every time I go there, I'm so jealous because it's amazing. Last year, she lost, I think, every leaf to all of them because there were so many monarchs. I think I counted 8 on one plant. At one point, they were like fighting with each other, these monarch caterpillars. It was absolutely incredible. So this is one that last year, if you had it, you probably got munched. It's a bit of a princess plant. So it's one of the few princess plants that I will allow because it's so worth it. So it likes full sun, takes a bit of shade, it doesn't like to have its feet wet. So that's why it doesn't do well in clay. It also has a great taproot. So it's Acephalus tuberosa, because that tube. So it makes it very drought tolerant, but you cannot touch that taproot. When it's growing, you leave it. You can't transplant it. It might do okay, but it's a little fussy. These plants, when everything else is growing about 6 or 8 inches, you're like, where's my butterfly milkweed? And you'll see this teeny little thing, and it's really easy to accidentally pull that out as a weed. So mark it, because you'll forget about it. And then when the temperature's just right, the little princess says, okay, I'm ready to grow. And then it goes, whoop, and it grows huge. Not huge, but like compared to what it started like. It's about, they maybe get about maybe 2 feet tall, dark green foliage, and a beautiful, boing, orange flower. So it's almost more shrub-like, almost like a spirea, one of those little round spirea shrubs that you get. But it's so incredible. It's so easy once it's happy and it does well, and it'll just bloom and bloom and bloom. And it's orange. And orange I love in the garden because it's not common except for annuals and marigolds, which I have been trying to grow my entire life, and I just had to stop. This one is absolutely incredible. And you'll get these little caterpillars on it, and you'll get munching, but the flowers keep going, and then you get monarchs, and they are a species at risk, so it's worth it. But last year was an exceptional year for them. I've never seen damage like I did last year on any of these. Usually it's just a couple nibbles. So if you had it last year and you got hit heavy, don't worry. It's worth it for the monarchs, and it'll come back. All right, so getting into the shade, this is a lovely little one, Woodland Sunflower. Now, some of the sunflowers, there is one called false sunflower, which is Helianthus. Oh, I'm gapping at the name. Helianthus. Anyways, it's called false sunflower seed. It's false sunflower, and it spreads and spreads and spreads. It's really great, but in a little garden, it'll take up too much space. This one's a little bit more dainty, and it takes a bit more shade. You'll see it growing on the edge of a forest. 2 to 3 feet tall. I think 3 is probably a bit generous for this one. But again, the right plant, right place. You can't take something that's used to growing in a mature, deciduous, lovely forest with that chocolate cake soil and put it into your brand new subdivision clay soil. It's just not going to work. So this one is one that if you live on the edge of a forest, you have mature trees, an older lot with great soil because you've been building it up for the last 20, 30 years, and you've got, maples and all these great trees, and you don't rake up the leaves, and then yeah, this is great. Lovely little plant that grows where a lot of things won't. Okay. Solomon seal. This one's, I just left it kind of vague, to be honest. When you go out into the garden, into the forest, you will see some false Solomon seal. The actual Solomon seal, and there's a few, are really cool, but not very visible, kind of boring flower. So that you're looking at foliage and texture, and it's okay. There are cultivars of Solomon seal that have a much bigger flower, and they're a bit more aesthetically pleasing, but they're gonna not, I don't see a lot of bugs and pollinators reacting to them. So this is the false starry, and there's another one that looks really close to it. I like this one because the flower is just right up in your face, and this will grow in shade. So this is typically found in maple woodlots, and it blooms beginning of spring, or sorry, like June is about when it finishes. End of May, June, it's in bloom. The one on the right is kind of the Solomon seal texture that you'll see. So if you look close, you can see these little teeny little white dots underneath. Those are the flowers. They're very, very, very subtle. So if you want flower wow, no, this isn't it. If you want shade that has a neat texture, then yes, Solomon seal is great. Keep in mind, if you want a cool, relaxing garden and you have shade, the more green you have, the more relaxing it'll be. And that sounds a bit weird. Green has a whole bunch of colors to it. And some of the best gardens I've seen that are shade have very, very, very little color and a whole lot of different colors and texture of green. And you just walk in, you feel cooler. I like to think I act cooler. It's just this calm feeling. So don't feel you have to have tons of color. Okay, green as a color comes in all different shades, and it has a really good psychological effect on you in terms of cool, relaxation, calm. Okay, so texture can do that without having to worry about bloom and shade, because that's a tough order. And here's the cultivar, the kind of garden variety, and I find it's, compared to the more delicate other ones, I find it's just a bit, hi, I'm in your face. So it's not my favorite. It's it gets a bit aggressive, and I just find it's too, I like the subtleties of that. This is what we're looking at in the shade. But everybody has their own opinion, and what I like, you might think is awful. So, you know, probably don't wear the same things you guys wear. Everyone puts on their own little art, and everyone likes different art. So what I like doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Okay, so it's your personal opinion. And if you love it, then that's all that matters. Great, black-eyed Susan. Very easy plant. I like it because it blooms when there's really not much else blooming. In that dull midsummer where all your spring plants are gone and your fall ones haven't come out, and it's just, you know? So I like this one because it's a really hardy, long-lasting, bloom, 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 bloom. Last year I had one, and it started blooming, I think it was in June, and I still had blooms in October. And I was like, you win and you get to stay. That real estate is yours. So wonderful little plant, part sun. It will sell seed, but not aggressively. And it's a biennial, so sometimes it won't come back. Sometimes it comes back or doesn't bloom. Other times you just have self-seeded ones that just, you think it was the same one. It really depends. Some cultivars do come back every year. So here's the native version of it. And like I said before, there's like all these new varieties and everything. The native ones I find are great. They're supposed to be drought tolerant. I find they droop. I find that they are not as drought tolerant as some of the other ones that are out there that I've talked about. So they do need a little bit of fertility in the soil to help offset that drought. It maybe top it up once in a while in a really bad drought in the midsummer with your rain barrel water. All right, Bloodroot. You know, it would have made sense to do these in bloom time, but yeah. This one is in bloom now. So if you've been out to a local forest, this little one is out there. It's one of the first ones to bloom in the forest. It's got a really cool leaf shape. So it blooms, it's awesome, and then there's nothing for the whole rest of the season, but thankfully it's got this great little leaf shape, so you still have that neat texture and shape in your garden. Again, this will grow in a very mature, deciduous maple, beech, oak forest, so it's going to have awesome soil. So it's not going to do well in your subdivision clay soil that has been, you know, brand new and mowed over by a million machines as they built your house. This one needs that shade garden, that mature trees, long-standing garden. Okay, and there it is. So you can see it poking up through the pine needles, and it comes up and it blooms before the leaves unfurl. And I, of course, couldn't find a picture of the leaves, but they're this kind of almost palmate wide, paw shaped, kind of cool. So this is great for those bees that first emerge and they're hungry, or the hummingbirds that have flown back and you know, things might be a bit slow and they need some pollen. These are good for that first wave. Okay, so they're, even though they're done fast and they show early, it's really, really important for those creatures, basically the bees, the other pollinators, the hummingbirds even. I got some great shots last year of a hummingbird feeding on a dandelion, just going from dandelion to dandelion because nothing else was in bloom in that area. So having these early bloomers is really, really important, especially after a long migratory trip for some of those. Another one I miss in my garden. This is blue lobelia, and it's this tall spike of blue. I find the more sun it gets, the more faded the blue is. So in a pretty much shady area or part shade, it gets a darker blue. So you get this beautiful spike of blue, and it's incredible. It is used to moist, shady areas, rich soil. So don't try to force it into dry soil. And this is my mom's story. One time she showed up and I lost all my jokes because I couldn't say anything with her in the crowd. She knows. So I had gone away and I said, she goes, would you need me to do anything with the garden? I said, okay, Mom, I have one plant I need water. That's it. I was going away for about 2.5 weeks. And so I filled up my watering can. I put it right by there. I said, I'm putting it right there. So it's right. You just literally have to water right there, Mom. Oh yeah. So I come back and watering can's full and the plant's flat. I said, Mom, what happened? Is that the one you wanted me to water? And I watered it and it popped right back up again. So she got away with that. The bees love it. It's a neat spike for those kind of part shade areas. If you have runoff or a wet area, it'll be quite happy. Not soaking wet, obviously. And it's just a really cool blue, another great color for the garden. I find it easier than cardinal flower, which is the same family, but it's that gorgeous red flower, because I find them just a bit more fussy in terms of how they overwinter. This is my latest discovery. This is my new garden, and I picked this up because I was at a garden center again, and I heard buzzing, and I looked around, and sure enough, in the garden center was this plant covered in bumblebees and sweat bees and all those wonderful things. And I'm like, I want that. And sure enough, it's giant hyssop, which is a native. And look how beautiful this was. And the bees were, they were all over it. And it's fall. And then I did some work and accidentally stepped on it when it was first coming out in the spring. And now it's gone. So I need to find another one. It's very tender, apparently, at the beginning of the year. So when you're working in the garden, be very careful and mark it. A very water efficient and a great kind of end of year razzmadazzle. So it starts mid to late summer and blooms, oh God, I think till frost, now way after frost, October time. So fabulous plant. And there's, I don't know if you can see, but if you can count the bees, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's probably more in here too. So I think I actually took this picture at the garden center and I'm like, I'm buying this plant. Then I had to nicely get the bees off so I could put it in my garden drive home. All right. I'm just gonna, wild ginger. I have this thing popped up and I can't see what I'm saying. Wild ginger is a really cool plant, not a cool flower. Okay, and I'll show you why. It's a ground cover. You'll see it growing in kind of along edges in forests. So again, like part shade to shade, very rich forest soil. So if it grows in a forest, It's going to want soil like a forest. Okay. Oh, there we go. So it's not the great picture, but they're almost like a rounded heart-shaped leaf, and they're fuzzy. But this is the little flower, and it hangs out at the bottom. So these are only maybe 6 inches tall at most. And this subtle little flower hides at the bottom. And why that is that it's pollinated by ground beetles, and it stinks like rotting something, rotting meat, we'll say. So the beetles come in and go, oh, hey, something's dead and rotting. Yay. And they crawl in and get disappointed and crawl out and go check the next one out. Boom, cross-pollination. So its function is to cater to those ground beetles, which are very, very important. Not to make your garden look fabulous with big blooms, but it's a great ground cover for kind of trailing in if you have a shady garden. And it's a really cool plant. This is, God, excuse the mulch. I tried this coconut mulch. It was terrible. I planted it. It was not very good soil. It got way too much sun. It did not thrive. It's not good for a dry, sunny area. I tried. It didn't work. So a shade garden plant with rich soil. So see how nice that soil is there. All right, Virgin's Bower. Oh, another one I had and lost. I should have had it doesn't like neighbors barbecuing turkeys next to it for 6 hours straight, because that's what killed mine. It got so hot that it just died off. This is a native clematis, and it's got these, again, that spray of white flowers. So not the big, beautiful purple and blue clematis that we're used to, but it still has impact, and you can kind of grow it up and, along a fence line. And you just get this gorgeous white, not like flowers going across. It does seem to like more moist-ish soil if there's good fertility. So it did great in my garden, again, until the barbecue incident. It did really well, and that was clay soil and no water. So a nice plant, just really tough to find, which is why I don't have it again, because if I can find it, I would absolutely have it in my garden, because it's incredible, and it does, for me, so much better than the other clematis. All right, wild strawberry. There's a few little ones, different varieties and stuff like that. They're not going to be showstoppers. So you can see down here, the grass will grow in, and they're very little teeny little flowers. These are 2 different varieties. But they'll just trail along, and they'll pop up here and there. They'll just kind of fill in that gaps in your garden. But this is why I have it. Because there's little teeny strawberries, and when you see a chipmunk, and I don't have a picture of it eating the strawberry, when they're eating these little strawberries, I do it for the chipmunks. So sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about the cute little critters in your garden and giving them something to eat that you will probably never see. And it's not going to take up too much space. It's not going to be a pain. It's just something you can add and let it subtly do its thing while the chipmunk is in heaven. Okay, so it doesn't always have to be flashy and awesome, but it's worth it. All right, so coneflowers, are they native? Again, this whole where is native? They are native to North America. Some say they're naturalized. I haven't read the most latest on it, but the closest thing we have to a native that's local is the pale purple coneflower. And that's the top one. And if you look at the differences, they're kind of like a single pop-up flower, and that's it. Very cool, but not going to have a wow impact, not that bouquet kind of impact that you might be looking for. But a really cool little plant if you can find it. There's another one. Mom, did you weed the garden? No, I only pulled out the weeds. I said, are you sure? Sure enough, I go to the weed bag and pull out my pale purple coneflower that my mom weeded. Oh, that one, yeah. I thought it was a weed. I'm like, Mom, it's 2 feet tall and it's a beautiful pink flower. Oh, I didn't know. So my mom was wonderful, but gardening is just not her thing. Give all credit to my dad. So if you want more flashy dazzle, razzle, dazzle, go with echinacea. And at the beginning, I talked about that genetic tweaking. The original Echinacea purpurea classic pink flower is your hardcore one that is going to be tough. It's going to be bloom, bloom, bloom. Very easy to deal with. when you get into the gorgeous reds and oranges, and oh, I see them, and every time, oh, okay, I'll just try it one more time. It never survives the winter for me. So just a little differences about the two of them, but the pale purple coneflower is a bit tougher to find, and it's just not showy. It's showy in a small setting, but you know, if you're sitting on your back deck and you have a big garden, it's going to be like, where is it again? So I can't stop. I can't leave this without talking about other things outside of plants. So I equate this to when you're in your house, you can have all walls, you can have all furniture, but we usually have a mix. So I call the trees as your walls, the shrubs are your furniture, and the flowers are your decoration pieces, your pillows, your pictures, your lamps. So you want to have a good mix for a nice, good looking area to be in. And when it comes to easiness, when it comes to not having to water, when it comes to impact in terms of like attracting things to your garden, birds, and like good birds, not those grackles, you know, the warblers, the songbirds, the chickadees, the bumblebees, native shrubs are where it's at. And if you go back in time, what would have been covered in our area was about 80% forest, about 10% wetland, and then the remaining is just all the other little meadows and alvars. So we have a whole lot more diversity if we look at forested trees and shrubs. So these are just a handful of great shrubs for your garden. Some of them will help the birds, some will help the pollinators, some will help butterflies. Spice bush is the specific host plant for the spice bush butterfly. It's actually named after it. Or sorry, spice bush swallowtail. High brush cranberry, watch it. There is a European one that's often sold as native, and it's awful. And those are the ones you see that still have all the berries on them because the wildlife's like, no, it's not what I'm looking for. Serviceberry, oh, it is if you don't have one in your garden, get one. It's amazing. But watch out because that's another thing that Bun's got too. And I have half of it, it's multi-stemmed, half of it ready to pop out in blooms. The other half, I'm thinking, is not going to make it. So you might have to watch protection if you have a rabbit issue. Again, I've lived here 7 years. I've never had this problem. Chokeberry is great if you have more space. It tends to get a little, or sorry, chokecherry I'm talking about. It gets a bit spready. Chokeberry is a wonderful little plant. It's Aronia melanocarpa. It's got these dark green leaves, purple berries, awesome little white spray, kind of flat flowers. I have no idea why I don't have a picture of it because it's one of my favorites, and it doesn't get too big. It can be pruned to a nice, manageable, 2 to 3 feet size. Incredible one. Elderberry is great, but it gets a bit, it tends to die off quickly, but they get the berries, you get the flowers. My neighbors have a black lace one, and it nicely cascaded into my backyard. And then every year, a whole bunch of it dies back. So you have to do a bit of pruning on some of these. Anyways, a whole list. I could do a whole talk on these alone. Incredible. Absolutely make sure you have shrubs in your garden. And if you want really low maintenance, just stick to flowering shrubs. It's amazing. This is one for the shade that I featured because it's pagoda or alternate leaf dogwood. A really bad picture. I gotta get it. They're all blurry in my end. Great architecture, grows in amongst the shadiest deciduous forest. So if you have shade, it's great. It's got a neat architecture. The more sun, the more bushier it gets. The less sun, the more kind of branched and fancier it gets, I guess. Nice white flowers. You get berries on it. Great little plant. Here's a serviceberry. This is the berries that the birds got to before I did, but that's what I do it for. Lovely red color in the spring, great architecture in the winter, flowers in the first spring. Like, it's just an incredible plant. And I know everybody who has one is on the other end nodding, going, oh yeah, I love my serviceberry. Great little shrub. There's smoke bush on the back. Okay. It either dies, and then when I try to get rid of it, it keeps growing back. So it half dead, half live, won't die, won't live. Terrible. This is 9-bark. So it comes in a lot of different cultivars, but this is your native one. So the flowers are going to have a bit more impact. Just plain green, but cool little button flowers. and really tough, grows in all kinds of conditions: acidic soil, alkaline, sandy, clay, dry, wet. Great little plant. Shrub, sorry. All right, blank screen. Really gotta not do this change thing. Trees, as I said, there are your walls of your home, of your garden. So trees are probably one of the most beneficial things you can have in your garden. There's a lot of animals that are absolutely dependent on them. There's butterflies that only eat trees. There's certain birds that will only nest in certain trees. They're really, really important. You got to watch it. So I have silver maple in here. If you want something that grows fast and fills in an area, great. Silver maple's wonderful. But if a tree goes fast, it's going to have softer wood. So the hardwoods that are stronger and tougher take a lot longer to grow. They're more dense, so they take a while to grow. Silver maple grows fast, but it tends to be a very weak plant. So if you plan on having a silver maple, and they are wonderful plants, make sure you have a bigger yard and that you plant it so if a branch falls off in a windstorm when it's at mature height, it's not going to take out your car, your house, your neighbor's fence. It's definitely I have a bigger acreage plant to have. Okay. White birch, hackberry, white spruce, honey locust. I found an ironwood for $8 at a garden center. This is why I go a lot. I'm so excited to have an ironwood. I don't know how it's going to go because it gets a lot of sun, but it's probably it is the densest wood we have. I figure I'll probably be at 100 before it's even above the fence line. Hopefully it'll grow faster than that, but great little plant. So many wonderful trees to choose from. So plant a tree, save the world. All right, so that's it. I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Scott, and we can go for some questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Aileen. Yeah, I loved all those pictures and all the examples. That was great. I'm just turning the chat on, everybody. Chat feature is back on now. So, and let me share my screen. Okay. So yeah, please, if you had any questions for Aileen, sparked by something she talked about, or maybe it's something else related to your landscaping or plants, please put it in the chat box that you'll find in your gray rectangular set of tools in Zoom. Right in the middle, you should see one called chat. So we'll just wait for a couple of
I
those.
knew this question. I just saw the, whoa, hold on. I just saw the Norway maple question. What do you plant under a Norway maple? Fake flowers. Just kidding. Okay, I'm just switching because I realized the earphones I had, I don't think were actually working the whole time. All right, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, now I can hear you.
Oh, you got really quiet, Aileen.
Did I?
Yeah, you got quieter than you were before.
Okay, then I'll go the other way.
Yeah, maybe let's keep. You were sounding okay with the old way you had it.
Okay, I just couldn't hear you very well. Okay, so
yeah,
pop those up. I see there's a lot coming in.
Yeah, why don't we start that first one I saw too? Yeah, what do you suggest flowers for under a Norway maple? Do you have any suggestions there?
Norway maples are tough. They're neat because their strategy is to shade everything, steal all the water and soil, and only let my numerous babies grow. Norway maples, unfortunately, they're tough as nails, but they are, I think they've now been classified as an international invasive species, so I'm not even sure Norway likes them anymore. Very, very, very tough. One of my gardens 3 or 4 ago was all Norway maple and Manitoba maples. And what we did was we basically Q-tipped the tree. So we cut off all the lower limbs to let some light in, but it's still tough. Big root geranium is one. Native plants are not going to do super well there because they just hog everything, and it's a non-native plant, so it's tough to grow. What you could do is it depends on the setting of where it is. So if it's just your front garden, you might want to just mulch it. If you have gardens everywhere and then this bald spot, you want to have something in there. The easiest thing to do is to add some artwork, honestly, like a little statue or something. Try big root geranium. It's not very native. Honestly, I've been asked, this question has been asked me for 20 years and I still have not found a really great, reliable native plant that'll grow under that. So I'm sorry, you can play with it. You can prune some. So prune the lower limbs quite up. If it's really big, then you want to maybe get an arborist in for safety. And then it lets a bit more sun in, and then you can play a bit more around with some of the shade ones I mentioned. If you have really good soil. And you might have to augment because it'll steal it. So short answer is nothing, but there's a little bit of hope.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Well,
right.
we have a question from Sharon. What can we use as a border beside boxwood?
I guess it depends if you're looking for, there's no native plant that will give you that geometric square shape. If you want like a lower growing type plant, they are cultivars, but some of those little globe cedars, it's amazing how tough they are. The chokeberry I mentioned, it will get 2 to 3 feet tall, so it's not going to be that neat little geometric shape again. There's nothing in native land that will really do that. You could also, if you're looking for that, repetitive border, maybe consider some of the grasses, either the big bluestem or the little bluestem, and plant them as a row because they will hold their shape well into the spring. So there's a few ideas for you. Hopefully that'll help. If not, you guys can always email me after. I don't know if my email's there, but it's BARCLAY I should actually just type it, can I? At rmsi.ca, and you can send me pictures. Sometimes it's a bit easier if I can see the landscape. All right.
Another question is, what recommendations do you have for heavy clay soils?
All right, so things like echinacea will grow really well. If it's really, really heavy clay, shrubs tend to do pretty good. They're a bit more tolerant of variances in this, with the exception of a few. But things like the chokeberry, the serviceberry, the 9-bark will do great. What they'll do is they have root channels. So as the roots push through the soil, a certain percentage of them every year die, and they leave these root channels. So it helps break up the compaction of the clay soil. So that'll help to improve the soil over time. Any of the tough meadow plants, so black-eyed Susans, echinacea, the grasses are great. I think the native grasses are great for busting through that kind of stuff. As long as they're not a grass that grows typically on the edge of a wet area, which would be something like Indian river grass. Even then, it's still pretty good. So there's a few for you. Any of the forest plants, they're just not going to be happy. So stick to stuff more meadowy. Even alvar, some of the less feisty, like Prairie Smoke, might be okay. You can augment your soil a little bit, and eventually you want to plan to feed that soil over time, just like what would happen in a successional natural area. So you're getting leaves and you're leaving them, and you're trying to do what nature would do, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Another question from Ruth. Oh, what about in a shady area? What should we do with a shady area and acidic soil?
Excuse me. So test your soil. Acidic soil is hard to find if it's not in a mature forest, because there's a whole plethora of fungi relationships and everything that has to make acidic soil. A lot of people will assume if something's not growing under a pine or a spruce tree, it's because it's acidic. But our soils are very neutralizing in southern Ontario. So we usually have clay or sand, and it's very hard to get the right organic composition, if you will, in there to really, really change the pH. So I would say make sure you've tested it, and unfortunately you can't come back and say, oh, I did test it and it came back. Forests tend to have more acidic soil, mature forests, because it's a complicated but very cool process. So if you have acidic soil, I'm assuming you also have shade, and you've said shade. So you can start pushing into more of those forest type plants. So the bloodroots, the wild ginger, if you can find trilliums, and a lot of times they're plant rescues. So keep an eye out for plant rescues in your area with permission through North American Native Plant Society. Some of the ferns, the native ferns might work. If it's not too dry, some of the sedges, which are really cool for texture and that nice kind of grassy, neat look. Shrubs are probably your better, a good bet, forest type shrubs. So again, that alternate leaf dogwood. If it gets a little bit of sun, some of the elderberries, those type of plants. But make sure you truly have acidic soil, and it's not, because if you're under a spruce and stuff isn't growing and you think it's because it's acidic, it could be that it's under a spruce, and they usually don't have a lot of things growing underneath them. It's just they're shading it out. Their roots are very close to the surface, and they're kind of on their own. There's a few things that'll grow in there. That false Solomon seal I showed you will probably do well in that kind of area as well, with the white terminal flower. So that'll hopefully help.
Yeah. Okay. Before I go to the next question, I've seen a couple people ask, so I'll just say it here that this video recording will be posted on the region's YouTube page. So if you're wanting to watch it again or go back to because you missed something, there'll be a video at youtube.com/region of Waterloo, and then that should be posted tomorrow. Our next question here is from Dorothy. She's wondering, what do you mean by early successional species?
Yes, sorry, I'm using jargon. So early successional species, if you think about a habitat or an ecosystem like a forest, and say there's some kind of disturbance, it burns down or something happens. The early species are the ones that are first on the scene. So it would be like a meadow, if you will. That's growing after a disturbance. And so those plants tend to grow in full sun. The soil may or may not be very good. They're the first ones out, and then over time you'll get a few shrubs coming into there, and then maybe a tree or two, and then fast forward, you've got an awesome forest 200-300 years down the road. So they're the first plants on the scene when it's open and there's been whatever was there previous has been wiped out. So hopefully that makes sense, Dorothy, for you. Again, it's weird not people saying, "Oh yeah, thank you."
Yeah.
Or no,
okay.
that's not what I meant at all.
Question from Carlene. What would you recommend under a mature, well-lit spruce tree between houses? Trees have been trimmed up 10 plus feet with dense needles on the ground.
So my first thing would be, and it's hard to go back in time, but don't trim spruces. So those ones that have that beautiful skirt on them, that's their natural form, and their skirt is their mulching, their root protection, everything. So when you trim them up like Christmas tree shapes, it just everything gets out of whack. So there's nothing that is naturally going to grow there, because usually there is no there in nature because it's right down to the ground. The pine needles, again, if you're worried about the acidification of your soil, truly get it tested, because it's probably not that bad. But you're going to have shade from above from the tree, and if you're in between two houses, you're probably getting a whole lot of shade cast from that. So I would check to see how much sun you actually have in a day, because my guess is you might not have that much, depending on where the sun comes in. I have a similar situation, but in between this narrow part between my neighbor's house and I still got grass growing because there's enough sun that comes through for about 3 hours a day, blazing hot from the south. It works. I don't know what your condition is, but if you don't have at least 2 hours of full sun, you're going to be really limited. You could try that false sunflower. Depending on is it sloped, is it clay soil, that might change it a bit. But you're going to try and look for plants that will grow on a forest floor if your soil is not compact, dry clay. If it is, it's going to be a bit more challenging. So again, if you can maybe send me more information or type more information, that would be great.
Okay. We're going to bring Aileen's video back in so you can see
Oh,
her
so
as
I have
she's
to put my
talking.
feather boa back on? Woo!
Oh, it's up to you.
I'm gonna have blue feathers for weeks in my house.
Right.
All right, there we go.
Roseanne's
Woo!
wondering, are service berries susceptible to disease easily? She's lost 2 already under a walnut tree, but here's that is not the reason.
The walnut, and I'm trying to think offhand of service berries. There's very few things that'll grow under a walnut tree. And that's because they have juglans, which is a phytotoxin. So what it does is it says, oh, you can't grow here because you're competition, get out. So it basically naturally makes the soil toxic so that only certain plants can grow under it. And I do not believe that service berry is one of them. So it's not susceptible to disease. It's susceptible to the walnut saying, no, I don't want you here. So it's basically made the soil toxic for that plant. There's other plants that have no problem growing under there. And of course I'm gapping at them right now. It's a very specific list, but I'm pretty sure that's what the issue is. It's nothing to do with the service berries themselves.
Okay.
Sad. Well, hopefully you have another spot for one because they're worth it.
I'll take a question here from YouTube. This is from Susan, who wonders, what are some plants for mason bees?
So the bees, generally anything that has that tubular shape or like a domed flower, anything purple, anything in that mauve color. So the 2 penstemons I showed you, the hoary beardtongue, that would work. There's actually another one it's more of a wetland edge plant called hoary vervain, another horrible name, but a wonderful little plant. Black-eyed Sus echinacea is a bee magnet, and it's so spiky. Like this is the traditional one, not the pale one. Both would work. But I was like, it's so spiky. How are they not getting hurt trying to get it? But my echinacea is always covered in bees. Any of the purple ones, any native flowers really that have a landing spot or a tube for them to crawl into are going to be good for your bees and all of your bees.
Okay, Patrick is wondering, he's looking for a good plant to fill in a sandy hill, which currently has very patchy grass.
Oh, sandy hills. Those are tough. Actually, and a really nice lady named Sandy Hill. Anyways, she's nice, but growing is challenging. Is it full sun? Assuming it's full sun, not shade. Sandy, again, how steep is that hill? If it's just a slight hill, but I've seen some that are like, like that, or if it's more just a slope. Shrubs are probably a good bet, but if you have grass, I'm assuming you want some kind of ground cover. The strawberries will work, but they're not going to be, they actually do quite well in sand, but they're not going to be enough coverage like you get from grass. So you have to change your expectations. If you want to fill it in and have it as a garden, then that opens up your realm. But ground covers, there's a native sedum, stone crop, mossy stone crop that is pretty decent on that kind of areas because it's a succulent. But if you want something that you can run around on, you're really limiting what you can do, unless you want to put in some kind of native grasses and have it more of a meadow type slope. So, feather in my mouth. So hopefully that helps a bit.
All right. Kathy is wondering, she says, I have a fully native front yard. There is a large patch of trout lily, about 20 years old and never a bloom. I don't touch it, leave the fall leaves, added coffee grounds. What else can I do to get a bloom?
Wait. Trout lilies are phenomenal because they're a colony plant and they can go for miles on the same kilometer or the same colony, and they can be hundreds of years old. So if it's not blooming, I would back off on adding anything because sometimes too much nitrogen can make something a little, it's like false security. It's like, oh, I'm growing, I don't need to have babies, I don't need to have a bloom. So sometimes plants won't bloom if they have too much nitrogen, they'll just keep growing green. So I would back off. If you're going to add anything, make sure it's just compost. And if you already have great kind of that chocolate cake soil, then I wouldn't bother with anything else. And sometimes it could just be that it's not a mature, even though it seems 20 years old, it might just not be mature enough because their colonies are 100 years old. And keep in mind that the leaves, for every, 200-300 leaves, you'll get one bloom. So they not every leaf will bloom anyways, even in the most happiest, oldest, biggest colonies out there. It's only a few that will actually bloom. So again, lower your expectations a little bit, but appreciate the awesome little leaves that come out in their neat patchy colors.
Okay, Judith is wondering, she says that her property is more gravel pit than land. Should I be making planter boxes for my garden?
Well, as I said, everything will grow anywhere. So gravel pit, the alvar plants. So you're looking at, again, Prairie Smoke because it's fantastic. Golden Alexanders. Oh no, it's balsam ragwort. That's the other nice little yellow one. The Indian paintbrush one, which is not probably what you're used to. It's a full spike of orange flowers. It's incredible. So look for alvar type plants, and if you're talking to a native plant nursery, they'll fill you in on what they do not have in terms of alvar plants, because it's a very specific type habitat, and not everything that grows there will grow in your gravel pit, but there's a lot that will. If you do planter boxes, it does open up your choice. However, overwintering, native plants don't usually do well in that. What you could try to do is build up your soil, but it's eventually just going to wash into that gravel. So you could do some of that, planter boxes, and just see how things go, but they're going to be fussy. You'd have to insulate them. Or look at what you can work with, and gravel pit, you can get some cool stuff. Shrubs are going to help because they'll start kind of securing and adding and feeding that gravel pit, so it starts to become more soily. Some grasses, some of the blue stems, probably big blue stem more so than little, might do well there, but you might have to kind of supplement a little bit with some soil every once in a while.
All right. Wendy's wondering about sweet autumn clematis. Is that a similar plant to the Clematis virginiana?
I would probably have to see the Latin name of that one. There is a clematis that looks an awful lot like the native one, and it's invasive. And I can't think of the name right now. If you can email me, maybe, or you know what? I'll Google it on my phone quickly. Bear with me, because I just want to see the Latin name. It's one I'm thinking of. Of course, this is when it starts slowing. There we go. All right, sweet autumn clematis. Yeah, no, it's not native. It is the introduced one. It's Clematis terniflora, and it is from northeastern Asia. So they are very similar in looks, but the Virginia, the one I showed you, Clematis virginiana, is the true native one. So.
Okay, virginiana. That is a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, and some of them are just Virginius. They have variances of it. So.
Okay. Next question is about grape hyacinth. They say they're pretty but invasive, taking over my lawn. Any suggestions how to remove or slow down the bulb reproduction?
So the good thing about bulbs is that you pull a bulb and the bulb's gone, so they don't have those runner roots and everything. So pulling them, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen grape hyacinth actually getting aggressive. That's kind of cool. It probably looks awesome until you have to mow. But it's obviously very happy. Pull. There's a great little weed puller I get. It's not that big Fiskars one that takes out like a handful of dirt and you trip over the hole. It's so big. It's this little 3-prong one, and I usually can get it at Home Depot or Home Hardware. They carry it, and it's got this spring-loaded thing, so it's fun because you kind of hit it into the bucket, and you don't have to bend over. You can just push it down over top of the plant, twist it, pull it up, and into the bucket. So unless you want to crawl right on your knees and pull them up, but just pull. If your lawn should be out competing it a little bit. If you have a lawn, it says it's all of your lawn. So if you want to keep your lawn and you want to toughen up the lawn, it'll kind of out compete it. Plus you want to just kick it back by plucking it. That weed puller is heaven sent. It's so good on your back. It's fun. I used to get my niece and nephew before they grew up and clawed onto it. I have them do the bucket challenge, see how far they could get it and still have the bucket, and they would fight over who would weed my lawn. So it's a fabulous little plant, or sorry, tool. It's kind of T-shaped with 3 prongs, and it's only about maybe that wide in terms of the prong thing here, the little Ewok fingers. And it's got like a spring-loaded thing on the top and then 2 handlebars. Fabulous, just pull. That's kind of cool that you've got an invasive hyacinth. That's neat.
This is a question from Cheryl. She's wondering, what is a good climbing plant for shade only?
Climbing plant for shade only. It's a little, it can be a little aggressive, but I always forget the main name. Parthenisis cinquefolia, the Virginia creeper. That's it. That's a really great one because it's fabulous color. It's got berries, but it can get a little too aggressive. But that's a really good one. Depending if it's full shade. The thing about vines is they'll grow to where the suns get, where they can get sun. So the roots can maybe take a bit more shade, but they'll move to where they get the sun for their leaves. So depending on the situation, if it's like you want to grow something along a fence and there's like say a chain link fence and there's all kinds of heavy shade, that's going to be a bit more challenging, and you might have to go with the Virginia creeper. And even then, you know, everything needs sun. That'll probably still need a couple hours of dapple shade or full sun. But that's a really safe to easy one to grow. There is a native trumpet vine. I believe it takes shade, but everybody I talk to says don't grow it. It's awful. You'll wake up with it next to you in bed. So you're a little limited in that situation, depending on, you know, how much shade is there. If it's on the edge, you could probably try that clematis, and it might just grow where you don't plan. So if you're trying to grow along a fence that's in full shade, it might not work.
Okay, well, I'm noticing that we are at 8:30 here, so I'm sure we won't be getting to all the questions. Aileen, do you want to do 1 or 2 more?
Sure, I'll just quickly scan through. Walmart, I know someone's asking about where to get native plants, so I will send that out. I don't usually go shopping at Walmart. I just can't help myself when I'm there or near there to go check out what they have in the garden center, especially because one day I'll find Prairie Smoke again. I don't know if that's good or bad. How tall do blue lobelia grow? They'll grow, depending on how happy they are, from 1 to 2 feet. Milkweed, if they're common milkweed, they do get aggressive, but totally worth it in my, because gosh, they smell great. They're amazing, but one plant will quickly turn into several. And they'll grow part shade, I should say, part sun, not full shade. And they'll grow in a lot of types of soil. They're not picky like the other one. And they're great for butterflies. The native dogwood I mentioned is called pagoda or alternate leaf dogwood. So Cornus alternifolia. And my email address again is my last name. So Barclay, Barclay, like the bank, but unfortunately not related, at rmsi.ca. Right.
Great. Thanks, Aileen. And you had a list, was it a list of suppliers that you had that I could email to people?
It's from a charity I work with, so it'll be branded that, but they'll be happy to share it. So, and it's right across the moraine, and it's ones that will actually deliver or do curbside pickup. You might have to drive a bit, but it's worth it. Just plan ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm happy to send that out to the attendees from tonight.
Yeah, and it looks like someone, thank you, Leanne, they've posted a great one on the CDC. Some of the conservation authorities have amazing resources for native plants. TRCA, CDC, all really good. So check them out, usually under a stewardship section or at home section. There's some amazing stuff.
Great. Okay.
Right, I like the chat.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna take this off. It's so itchy.
You're free.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. On behalf of the region of Waterloo, glad you could all be here. Thank you very much to Aileen. You did a great job. If you haven't already, we have another webinar next Wednesday night, and there's our final and 4th one the following Wednesday, May 13th. So there's a link on your screen. You can register there. And we will also be posting the video recording of this one on YouTube. Last week's is already on YouTube at youtube.com/Region of Waterloo. So thanks everybody, and maybe we'll see you next time. Take care.